I'm Gabriel Johnson, 73 years old. At my wife Serena's funeral, I watched my son Terrence perform his grief. He sobbed into his hand, his shoulders shaking, but I didn't see a single tear hit the ground. His wife Brittany stood beside him, rubbing his back, but her eyes kept darting to her gold watch. 3 days. My wife of 50 years had been gone for 3 days, and Brittany was already checking the time. Back at the house, they were already whispering about selling it, about moving me to a home before the casserole dishes were even cold. They didn't know about the sealed envelope Serena left me 6 months ago. They didn't know about the penthouse apartment in Midtown or the $500,000 in the private account. So a week later, when my son walked into my room and said, "Start packing, Dad. The house is sold," I just smiled. I had already packed. But the bags weren't mine. They were theirs. Before I tell you how I turned their greed against them, let me know in the comments where you're watching this story from. And please hit that like button and subscribe if you believe that respect for your elders is non-negotiable. The November air in Decatur was cold, but not as cold as my daughter-in-law's heart. I stood there at the graveside, the smell of damp earth filling my lungs. Serena was gone. 50 years just gone. Terrence, my son, my only child, was making a show of collapsing against Brittany. She held him, but her face was a mask of impatience. I watched her glance at her watch again. That was the 3rd time in 10 minutes. I heard one of Serena's cousins whisper, "Look at her, not a tear in her eye." I wanted to tell her, that's because she's already calculating. The ride back to the house was silent. The house, our house. 50 years we had lived in that 2-story home on Maple Drive. We bought it when I was just a young man working my first management job at the warehouse. Serena had planted the oak tree out front with her own hands. Now it towered over the roof. As soon as we walked in, the silence felt wrong. It was heavy, suffocating. Terrence and Brittany had been living with us. No, on us, for the last 5 years. Ever since Terrence's tech startup went bankrupt. They took the master bedroom because, as Brittany explained, she needed the natural light for her home-based work, which as far as I could tell meant taking pictures of herself for social media. I walked past them and headed for the kitchen, needing the comfort of making a cup of coffee. I stopped. I could hear them whispering from the dining room. "Did you ask him yet?" Brittany's voice was sharp like broken glass. "Not now, baby," Terrence mumbled. "It's not the right time. My mom just—" "It's the perfect time, Terrence," she hissed. "He's emotional. He's vulnerable. We need to know what's happening with the house." I heard Terrence sigh. It was the sound of a man who had given up long ago. "Just give it a week. Please, just 1 week. Let's just show a little respect." Respect? The word sounded foreign coming from his mouth. I didn't let them know I heard. I made my coffee and went to my room, or rather the guest room, which had become my room when they moved in. I sat on the edge of the twin bed and looked at the real master bedroom across the hall. My room. Serena's room. I walked in. It still smelled like her, like lavender and old books. I knew exactly what they were whispering about. The house, the land, the money. They thought I was just an old fool, a 73-year-old man who didn't understand the world anymore. They thought that with Serena gone, I was just a final obstacle. I went to her closet past the dresses I knew I would never see her wear again. I reached to the back behind her stack of winter sweaters. My fingers touched a large sealed manila envelope. I pulled it out. My name, Gabriel, was written on the front in her elegant handwriting. I remembered the day she gave it to me 6 months ago. She was frail, sitting up in this very bed, the cancer already taking its toll, but her eyes were sharp. "Don't open this, Gabriel," she had whispered, pressing it into my hands. "Not until you really need to. Not until you see our son forget who he is." I had looked at her confused. "Forget who he is? What are you talking about, Serena?" She just squeezed my hand. "You'll know, my love. You'll know. I've taken care of you. I've always taken care of you." I didn't understand then. I thought she was just worried about me being alone. But holding that envelope now, hearing their whispers from downstairs, I understood perfectly. She knew. She had seen this coming. She had seen the greed in Brittany's eyes. She had seen the weakness in our son. I clutched the envelope. Not yet, Serena. Not yet. I was still holding it when the door opened without a knock. Brittany stood there, her black funeral dress already unzipped slightly at the back. She wasn't even pretending to mourn anymore. "Oh, good. You're in here," she said, her voice bright artificial. "Bo, I was thinking, I know this is hard, but we should probably start cleaning out Mom's closet. Get these things sorted. I think we should donate her clothes as soon as possible. It's better to just clear the space, get a fresh start." She wasn't asking. She was telling me. She was standing in my wife's room less than 4 hours after we buried her, talking about clearing the space. I stared at her. The audacity was breathtaking. She was trying to erase Serena. "No," I said. My voice was quiet, but it had a steel in it that surprised even me. Brittany's smile faltered. "What?" I said. "No, leave her things. I'm not ready." She let out an exasperated sigh, dropping the facade completely. "Bo, you can't just cling to the past forever. It's not healthy. Terrence and I are just trying to help you move on." "I'll move on when I'm ready," I said, sliding the envelope back into its hiding place. "Now, if you don't mind, I'd like to be alone." Brittany stared at me, her eyes narrowing. She had expected a grieving, broken old man she could push around. She found something else. She turned and walked out, her heels clicking angrily on the hardwood floor. I heard her stomp down the stairs. "He's being difficult," I heard her say to Terrence. I knew right then that the 1 week of respect Terrence had asked for wouldn't even last the night. The battle for my home and my dignity had already begun. Just 2 days, that's all the respect Terrence had managed. 2 days after we put Serena in the ground, Brittany found me in the living room. I was trying to read the newspaper, but the words just swam in front of my eyes. She, on the other hand, looked energetic. She was holding a stack of glossy brochures, fanning them out like a deck of cards. "Bo," she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "I know this is all so hard right now." She sat on the arm of Serena's favorite chair, a place she had never sat before. "And Terrence and I, well, we're just so worried about you." I lowered the newspaper. "Worried about what, Brittany?" "About you," she said, opening the first brochure. "Being here, alone, in this big, empty house." She gestured around the room she and my son had occupied for half a decade. "It's too much for one person. The upkeep, the stairs, the memories." The memories. As if she had any right to speak about them. I thought back 5 years. Terrence standing in this exact spot, his eyes downcast, filled with a shame I mistook for humility. "Just a few months, Dad," he had promised. "My startup just hit a snag. I just need a place to get back on my feet. Brittany and I will be out of your hair before you know it." Serena, bless her heart, had opened her arms immediately. "This is your home, son. Always." A few months turned into 60. They moved in, and within a week, Brittany had suggested we swap bedrooms. Terrence and I just need the master bedroom," she had explained. "It has much better natural light for my work." Her work was taking pictures of makeup she sold online. So Serena and I, after 45 years in our bedroom, moved our lives into the smaller guest room. In 5 years, they had not paid a single utility bill, not $1 toward the mortgage or the property taxes. They ate our food. They used our electricity. They filled our home with their silence and their resentments, living off the retirement I had earned from 40 years of managing a warehouse and the savings Serena had carefully built. And now this woman was worried about me being alone. I just nodded. "It's a lot to manage," I said, my voice neutral. Her smile widened. She thought I was agreeing. She spread the brochures on the coffee table. "That's why I found these. This one is my favorite. It's called Willow Creek. It's a premier retirement community." I looked at the picture. It showed smiling seniors, all white, playing shuffleboard on a pristine lawn. It looked less like a home and more like a high-end prison. "It's perfect for you," she cooed. "It's completely secure. They have gated entry. They have gourmet meals, social activities, and a 24/7 nursing staff on call." I looked up from the brochure and met her eyes. "I'm 73 years old, Brittany. I'm not sick. I don't need a 24/7 nurse." The fake sympathy evaporated from her face instantly. Her patience, always thin, snapped. "Well, we need it," she said, her voice becoming hard. "It will give us peace of mind. And honestly, Terrence and I need our own space. We've put our lives on hold for 5 years. We can't start our own family. We can't move forward if we're constantly worried about you falling down the stairs." The lie was so blatant it was almost impressive. They couldn't start their lives, as if my 73-year-old presence was the only thing stopping them. I folded my newspaper slowly. I placed it on my lap. I looked at her, the stranger who lived in my house, who had slept in my wife's bed, who was now trying to ship me off to a holding pen so she could cash in. "So what you're saying," I said, my voice quiet, "is that you and Terrence want to sell this house?" Brittany's eyes narrowed. The mask was completely off. She wasn't asking me. She was telling me. "It's the most practical solution, isn't it?" she said. "For everyone." That evening, Brittany was quiet. She served the lasagna she'd heated up from a box and didn't look at me. She had failed. Now it was Terrence's turn. He waited until she was in their room, her reality TV shows blaring through the door. He came and sat across from me at the kitchen table. He put on his sincere face, the one he always used when he wanted something. "Dad." He started leaning forward, trying to look earnest. "Listen, about earlier today. I know Brittany. She comes on a little strong. She doesn't mean it badly. She's just practical. She worries." I just looked at him over the rim of my coffee cup, waiting. "She's right about one thing, though." He continued, lowering his voice. "We are worried about you. This is a big house, and, well, selling it just makes sense." He picked up the Willow Creek brochure she had left on the counter, tapping the glossy picture of the smiling seniors. "This place is top-notch. It would all be taken care of. Your meals, your security. You wouldn't have to worry about a thing." He paused, then played his main card. "And the money from the house. Dad, it would pay for a suite at Willow Creek for the rest of your life. Easy. And there'd be a good bit left over. A nice nest egg for emergencies." A good bit left over. My stomach tightened. I knew exactly what leftover meant in Terrence's vocabulary. Leftover meant for Terrence. My mind snapped back 10 years. Terrence, 35 years old, his eyes shining with that same manic energy Brittany now had. He had a startup, a game-changing app. He just needed seed money. "Dad, I'm on the verge of something huge," he'd said, pacing this very kitchen. "I just need 50,000. I can't ask Mom, she wouldn't understand the tech, but you do. You've managed logistics. This is just digital logistics." I was a fool. I was proud. My son, the entrepreneur. I was just a warehouse manager. What did I know about tech? I pulled $50,000 out of my 401k. $50,000 of 40 years of sweat of cold mornings on the loading dock of aching backs. I never told Serena. I couldn't. I lied to her about the account, told her the market had dipped. I felt sick about that lie every day for a decade. The startup, sync up, or whatever he called it, lasted 6 months. The $50,000, it vanished. I found out later through a stray credit card bill he'd left behind where it really went. A leased BMW. A high-rise office space with a foosball table. Client meetings in Las Vegas. He never paid back a dime. He never even apologized. He just failed, quietly, and moved on. And here he was 10 years later, sitting across from me, his eyes gleaming with that same light, talking about a good bit left over. I pushed the memory down. It was a cold, hard stone in my gut. I looked at my son. "I need time, Terrence," I said, my voice barely a whisper. This is my home. It's your mother's home. It's all happening too fast." Terrence's sincere face crumpled. The patience, just like Brittany's, snapped instantly. "Time," he said, his voice rising. "Time for what, Dad? What's time going to do? Mom's gone." He stood up, knocking his chair back slightly. The sudden movement made me flinch. "What is the point of you staying here, just sitting in this museum? It's falling apart. The plumbing is old, the wiring is ancient. Brittany hates this kitchen." The words hung in the air, cold and sharp. Brittany hates the kitchen. I looked at the faded yellow cabinets, the ones Serena and I had picked out and hung ourselves in 1985, the ones where she taught Terrence how to bake chocolate chip cookies, him standing on a little stool covered in flour. Brittany hates it. I repeated, not as a question, but as a statement. Terrence realized his mistake. I saw the flash of panic in his eyes, but instead of backing down, he doubled down, the frustration taking over. "You know what I mean? It's not functional. It's not modern. Look, it doesn't matter what you want, okay? We've already called an appraiser. We're just trying to get a head start on the paperwork." He paused, then delivered the final blow. "They're coming on Friday." Friday morning came too fast. At 10 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. Before I could even push myself up from my chair in the living room, Brittany darted to the door, flinging it open. "You must be Chad," she chirped, her voice 2 octaves higher than usual. A young white man in a shiny suit that looked a size too tight stepped inside. He had slicked back hair and was holding a digital tablet. He looked less like an appraiser and more like a shark smelling blood in the water. "Brittany, great to meet you," he said, shaking her hand firmly, his eyes completely ignoring me as I stood in the living room archway. "Terrence isn't here. He had a client meeting," Brittany lied smoothly. "But I can show you everything. We're the ones handling the estate." "We." The word stung. She led him through the house, and I just followed a few steps behind a ghost in my own home. She was a natural performer. She pointed at the walls, her hands gesturing grandly. "We believe this main wall can be knocked out, completely open up the entire living space, create a real flow." She said "we" again. She gestured to the hallway. "And there are original hardwood floors under this old carpet. Lots of potential here. Lots." She was a saleswoman selling a life that wasn't hers, selling my memories, selling me. I watched her, and the anger in me wasn't hot. It was cold. It was a cold, hard stone settling in my gut. She was describing 50 years of my life as potential, as something to be gutted and flipped for a profit. She saved her worst disdain for the kitchen. I didn't follow them in. I just went and sat at the small kitchen table, my usual spot, while they stood in the center plotting. This room was my sanctuary. This room was Serena's heart. I looked at the faded yellow cabinets, the paint peeling just slightly at the corners. I remembered the Saturday in 1985 when Serena and I had painted them. We had argued for an hour at the hardware store. I wanted a practical, boring white. She insisted on this bright, sunny yellow. "I want a little bit of sunshine in the house, Gabriel," she had insisted, her eyes sparkling. "Even on the gray days." She was right. She was always right. For 40 years I had sat at this very table drinking my morning coffee while she stood at that stove, humming along to the radio, the smell of her coffee mixing with the cinnamon she put in her oatmeal. I could still smell her. I remembered her teaching Terrence how to bake chocolate chip cookies on that very counter. He was so small he had to stand on a stool, and he got flour all over his face. He had laughed a pure, innocent laugh that I hadn't heard from him in decades. This room wasn't outdated. It was a living, breathing archive of my entire marriage. "And this kitchen, of course, needs a total gut job," Brittany said, her sharp voice snapping me out of my memory. "Just rip it all out. New appliances, granite countertops, maybe a big island in the middle." Chad nodded, tapping furiously on his tablet. "Definitely. The kitchen is where you make your money back. A full gut may be $20,000 in upgrades, but you'll easily double that on the sale price." They stood there for a moment, 2 vultures carving up a life that wasn't even cold yet. Chad finally seemed to notice me sitting at the table. He looked at me, then at Brittany, confused, as if I were a piece of furniture he hadn't accounted for. "And you are?" he asked, but he wasn't asking me. He was asking her. He didn't even see me as a person worth speaking to. Brittany let out a small, tinkling laugh, a laugh that made my skin crawl. "Oh, that's just my husband's father, Gabriel. Don't worry about him." She waved her hand dismissively like she was shooing away a fly. "He'll be moving to a much better facility very soon. He needs specialized care." A better facility. Specialized care. She was painting me as senile, as an incompetent old man who was just part of the inventory to be cleared out along with the old cabinets and the worn carpet. Chad's expression cleared instantly. "Got it," he said, and he turned his back on me. He didn't look at me or speak another word to me for the rest of his visit. He treated me like I wasn't there. And in that moment, I let him. I let them both think it. It was better that way. They finished the tour and walked to the front porch to talk numbers. I stayed in the kitchen, but I left the door cracked open just enough. The wind carried their low, conspiratorial voices right to me. "So what's the bottom line?" Brittany asked, her voice dropping the fake charm. "Market's hot," Chad said. "If you clean it out, maybe throw a coat of paint on the walls, you could list it for $700,000, maybe $720, but it'll sit for a month, maybe 2. You'll have staging costs, open houses, inspections." "No," Brittany said immediately. Her voice was sharp. "We can't wait that long. We need it done. Fast. What's the fast price?" I heard Chad pause. He was good at this. He was letting her show her desperation. "Okay," he said finally. "You want fast. I have an investor I work with, a cash buyer. They buy properties as is. No repairs, no staging, no open houses. We can close in 7 days. Brittany was silent, waiting. I could picture her leaning in, her eyes wide with greed. The offer would be lower, of course, Chad continued. They'd probably come in at $650,000, cash, next week. I heard Brittany's sharp inhale of breath. Yes, she whispered, her voice full of a hungry, desperate energy. That one. Do that one. $650,000, as fast as possible. You got it, Chad said. I'll draw up the preliminary paperwork. You and your husband will just need to sign. I heard his footsteps go down the walkway. A car door slammed. A moment later, Brittany walked back into the kitchen. She was glowing, her face flushed with victory. She looked at me, still sitting at the table, the old senile man who was in her way. She put on her mask of fake sympathy again, the one she wore so well. Well, that's all done, she said brightly. He was a very nice man, wasn't he? Don't you worry about a thing, Beau. We're taking care of everything. I just looked up at her and nodded slowly. Thank you, Brittany. I knew I could count on you. It came on a Sunday, exactly 1 week after the funeral. The house was quiet, too quiet. I was in the living room in Serena's armchair trying to read a book, but my eyes just scanned the same page over and over. Terrence had been in his room, their room, all morning. I heard their low, muffled arguing the way I had for 5 years. Then silence. His footsteps were heavy in the hall. He stopped in the archway. I didn't look up, but I could feel him standing there, shifting his weight, building up the courage to do something. Dad. I slowly lowered my book. He was dressed in his good jeans and a polo shirt, looking like he was about to go to the mall, not like a man who had just lost his mother. He wouldn't look me in the eye. He was staring at a spot on the carpet. Dad, he said again, his voice strained. We need to talk. You need to start packing your things. The book felt heavy in my lap. The air in the room suddenly felt thin. I kept my voice perfectly level. Is that so? Why is that, son? He finally looked at me, a quick darting glance, then back to the floor. Look, it's done okay, Brittany and I. We accepted an offer on the house. There it was. Not a request. Not a discussion. A declaration. He said it so fast, like ripping off a Band-Aid. The house is sold. He said, the words coming faster now, gaining momentum. The appraiser, Chad, he found a cash buyer, an investment company. They offered $660,000. 660, Dad. That's 10 grand more than he even thought we'd get. It's a fantastic deal. I just stared at him. He was trying to smile to sell this to me as a victory. They want to close fast, he continued, shoving his hands into his pockets. 30 days. They're paying cash, so there's no mortgage holdup. It's a clean break, Dad. It's what's best. He stood there waiting for my reaction, waiting for me to cry or yell or maybe just nod obediently like the senile old man they thought I was. But I said nothing. My mind went blank, and then it flooded. 50 years. I had carried Serena over this threshold, a young bride in a second-hand dress, laughing in my arms. 50 years. I looked at the spot on the hardwood floor where I had taught Terrence to take his first steps, his tiny hand gripping my finger. I remembered dancing with Serena in this very room on our 40th anniversary, swaying to an old Sam Cooke record, her head resting on my chest. I remembered bringing her home from the hospital for the last time, setting her up in the armchair I was sitting in now so she could look out the window at the oak tree she'd planted. She had taken her last breath in this house, in our bedroom. The bedroom my son and his wife had taken from us while she was still alive. 50 years of graduations, Christmases, arguments, and laughter. 50 years of life. And my son, the baby I had held in my arms, the boy whose future I had poured my entire life into, had just sold it all for $660,000. He spoke of it with the same emotion he would use to sell a used car. My heart, which I thought had broken when Serena died, found a new way to break. I finally looked up at him. I let him see the cold emptiness in my eyes. I kept my voice calm, so calm it sounded like a stranger's. And where am I supposed to go, Terrence? Before he could even form an answer, Brittany appeared in the archway behind him, drawn by the silence. She had a triumphant smirk on her face. The mask of the grieving daughter-in-law was gone. This was the real Brittany. We already took care of that, Beau, she said, her voice like honey covering poison. We went ahead and put the deposit down on that lovely room at Willow Creek. Remember the one from the brochure? She stepped forward. Her arms crossed the victor, claiming her spoils. They're holding it for you. Your first month is all paid for. You'll love it there." They had done it. They had already paid the deposit. They were shipping me out. They had it all planned. The final irreversible insult. And in that moment, as I looked at their two greedy, expectant faces, I felt something shift. The grief didn't disappear, but the cold, hard stone of anger in my gut crystallized. It became clear. This was the moment Serena had warned me about. This was the moment my son had truly forgotten who he was. It was time. I smiled. A small, thin smile that didn't reach my eyes. It must have terrified them because they both took a small step back. "Well," I said, my voice still quiet, "that's very efficient of you. Thank you for handling everything." Terrence and Brittany exchanged a look of pure surprised relief. They had expected a fight. They got this. "Oh," Terrence stammered. "Good. That's great, Dad. So you understand. You're okay with this." I slowly pushed myself up from Serena's chair. "Oh, I understand everything, son," I said. "And you're right. We need to get moving." I looked around the room at the life they were so eager to erase. "In fact, I've already packed." A look of genuine shock passed over Terrence's face. You have... "That's wonderful, Beau," Brittany gushed. "See, you are ready to move on. Where are your bags?" I met her gaze. "Yes, I'm ready," I said. "And the bags are all packed and ready to go, but the bags I packed, they aren't mine." I looked past her toward the master bedroom they occupied. "They're yours." Brittany's eyes went wide, then narrowed into slits of pure fury. "What the hell are you rambling about?" she snapped. Her voice was sharp, no longer the sweet, concerned daughter-in-law. "What is wrong with you? Are you senile? Did you forget to take your medication?" Terrence looked paralyzed, stuck between his wife's rage and my sudden strange confidence. "Dad, what do you mean, our bags?" I said, my voice cutting through her accusation that I am not, in fact, senile. I walked past them. I ignored their baffled stares. I went to the guest room, my room, and walked to the small dresser in the corner. I'm not confused, and I am not rambling. I opened the top drawer, pushed aside the neatly folded socks Serena had organized for me, and my fingers touched the heavy manila envelope. I pulled it out along with the single ornate skeleton key tied to it with a blue ribbon. I said, walking back into the living room, "the clearest I have ever been." I held up the envelope. It was thick. It felt heavy. It had Serena's precise, elegant cursive on the front. "Gabriel." Brittany scoffed, but it was a nervous sound. "What is that?" "More old memories." "We don't have time for this, Beau. The house is sold. You need to pack." "No," I said, looking at Terrence. "The house is not sold, and you need to listen." I sat down in Serena's armchair. I felt calm. For the first time since she died, the crushing weight of grief lifted, replaced by a cold, sharp certainty. I broke the wax seal. Terrence and Brittany just stood there watching. They were so used to being in control that my silence, my deliberate movements had completely thrown them off balance. I unfolded the thick, cream-colored paper. Serena's handwriting. It was like hearing her voice in the room. I looked at Terrence. "Your mother wrote me a letter. She asked me to read it when this exact moment happened." I began to read aloud. "My dearest Gabriel, my love, if you are reading this, it means I am gone, and it means our son Terrence has done exactly what I was afraid he would do." Terrence flinched as if he'd been struck. I continued reading. "I love our boy Gabriel. I love him more than life, but I am not blind. I know you see his heart, but I see his weakness. He is a good man, but he is weak. He follows. He doesn't lead. He is easily swayed by bright, shiny things." I paused and looked at Brittany. Her face had gone pale, her lips pressed into a thin white line. I kept reading. "And I know his wife. I know Brittany. She is not weak. She is hungry. She is ambitious. And she is greedy. She does not love our son Gabriel. She loves what she thinks our son will give her. And with me gone, she sees you as the only thing standing in her way." "How dare she?" Brittany finally exploded. "How dare that old woman—" "Be quiet," Terrence roared. It wasn't a defense of me. It was the terrified sound of a man who realized the game was changing. He stared at the letter in my hand, his eyes wide with dread. "What else does it say, Dad?" His voice was a whisper. I looked back down at the letter. "She knew Terrence," I said softly, looking at him over the paper. She knew everything, even the things I tried to hide from her. I read the next lines. Gabriel, I know you gave him the money, the $50,000 10 years ago from your 401k, the money you saved for us. Terrence stopped breathing. He looked at me, his face a mask of disbelief. He never ever thought I would have told her. I hadn't. I never told her. I said to him, my voice thick. She just knew. She saw the withdrawal slip in your coat pocket when you left it here. She checked our accounts. She knew you had taken it, and she never said a word to me or to you. She just protected us both. She protected me from the truth and you from the consequences. But she did do something, I said. She started to plan. I read the final devastating paragraph of the letter. That day, Gabriel, 10 years ago, I took half of our remaining assets. I contacted our old friend, Mr. Henderson, and I created an irrevocable trust, the Serena Johnson family trust. A trust? Brittany's voice was barely audible. What does that mean? What trust? I folded the letter. I looked at Terrence. I looked at Brittany. The appraiser. The cash offer. The 30-day notice. Their whole pathetic, greedy plan. It means son. I said, my voice clear and final, that 10 years ago your mother quietly and legally transferred the deed of this house into that trust. I let the words sink in. Terrence just stared. Brittany was shaking her head, not understanding. I laid it out for her. It means that this house, my house, hasn't been in my name or Serena's name for a decade. It means that you and Terrence just tried to fraudulently sell a property that you do not own. It belongs to the trust. Brittany's face turned an ugly shade of red. But Terrence is the son. He inherits the trust. I looked at the envelope one last time. No, I said, pulling out the final document. He doesn't. Your mother was smart, Terrence. She knew this day would come. I held up the trust document. The trust owns the house, and the trust names only one person as the sole trustee, the sole manager, and the sole beneficiary. I paused, letting them hang on that last thread. Me. Brittany stared at me for a long second. Her pale face went blank, then purple with rage. And then she laughed. It wasn't a real laugh. It was a sharp, high-pitched shriek that clawed at the air in the silent room. A trust, she screeched. You, the trustee. That is the most pathetic, desperate lie I have ever heard. She turned to Terrence, who was frozen, his face the color of ash. Do you hear him, Terrence? He's completely lost it. He's senile. This is exactly what we were talking about. She stepped toward me, jabbing a finger in my face. You think you're clever, old man. We sold the house. We have a contract. We have a buyer. It's a done deal. Terrence's name is on the deed right alongside Serena's. We checked. I didn't flinch. I just looked at her, this small, furious woman who had stormed into my home and tried to tear it down. I let her finish her tantrum. Is that what you checked, Brittany? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Did you check the county records, or did you just look at the mailbox? She stopped, confused. What? What are you talking about? Terrence's name is on the utility bills, I said, enunciating every word. And the cable subscription, it has been for 5 years ever since he moved in and you both decided you were the heads of the household. But it has not been on the property deed, the legal title, for over a decade. Her face began to tremble. The confidence was cracking. You're lying. You're a lying, senile old fool. Am I said. I reached into my shirt pocket. You see, unlike you, Brittany, I don't just make things up. I come prepared. I pulled out my cell phone. It was an older model, a simple smartphone, not the fancy new model she and Terrence bought themselves every 6 months. I tapped the screen. A number was already dialed. You remember my wife's old friend, Mr. Henderson, don't you, Terrence? I asked my son. The lawyer, the one who handled your startups and corporation papers before you ran it into the ground. The one who came to Serena's funeral. Terrence swallowed his eyes wide with a new kind of terror. He recognized the name. He's a very good lawyer, I said. Very thorough. He's been the legal counsel for the Serena Johnson Trust for 10 years, and he's been waiting for my call. I hit the speakerphone button. The ringing cut through the room once, twice. Gabriel, A deep, powerful voice answered immediately. I was hoping you'd call. Is everything all right? Everything is just fine, Mr. Henderson. I said, my eyes locked on Terrence and Brittany. I just have a few people here who seem to be confused about the ownership of this property. I was hoping you could clarify things for them. Brittany's mouth opened, but no sound came out. I'd be delighted, the voice on the phone said, crisp and professional. Good morning, Mr. Johnson. Good morning, Ms. Brittany. He knew their names. The color drained from Brittany's face. My name is Alan Henderson. The voice continued, slow and deliberate, like a judge reading a verdict. I am the acting attorney for the Serena Johnson Irrevocable Trust established 10 years ago. I can confirm as of this morning that the property at 1240 Maple Drive, Decatur, Georgia is held solely and entirely by said trust. He paused, letting the legal weight of his words fill the room. To be perfectly clear for the record, Mr. Terrence Johnson has absolutely no ownership stake in this property. He holds no title. He has no legal authority to list, mortgage, or sell this asset. Any attempt to do so is null, void, and fraudulent. Fraudulent. That was the word that broke them. Brittany grabbed Terrence's arm, her nails digging into his sleeve. But the contract, she shrieked, her voice cracking. We signed a contract. The buyer, we accepted the offer. Ah, yes, the contract, Mr. Henderson said. His voice was laced with ice. You mean the fraudulent document you and your husband signed misrepresenting yourselves as the legal owners? The one you were planning to use to steal $660,000? Terrence finally found his voice, but it was a weak, strangled whisper. We didn't. It was a mistake. We thought. You thought you were dealing with a confused old man. Mr. Henderson cut him off. But you weren't. You were dealing with his late wife's legal team. We've been monitoring this situation for some time. But the appraiser, Brittany stammered, desperation in her eyes. Chad, he said the sale was fine. Ah, yes, Mr. Chad, Henderson said. The cash buyer specialist. He was very cooperative. Once we explained the legal penalties for conspiring to commit felony real estate fraud, he provided us with a very detailed affidavit of your conversations, Brittany, including your explicit request to sell it fast and get the old man out. Terrence stumbled back, hitting the wall. He looked at me, his eyes wide, the full, terrible truth dawning on him. The appraiser, the cash buyer, the easy sale. It was all cooperative, he whispered. Chad, he was working with you. I just looked at my son, the boy I had raised, the man who had tried to steal my life from under me. Terrence, I said, keeping my voice calm, who do you think sent Chad to you in the first place? I did more than just send him son. Terrence's head snapped up. What does that mean? That cash buyer. I continued, my voice steady. The one who offered $660,000. The one you and Brittany were so desperate to sell to the one you celebrated for being so fast. I let the silence hang in the room, heavy and thick. Brittany was vibrating with a rage. She couldn't yet unleash her mind, clearly spinning, trying to find a way out of the corner she was in. You've been wondering who they are, I asked. You've been celebrating this mysterious investment company that saved you both. They just stared. It's a company called G&S Holdings, I said. Terrence frowned. G&S, I've never heard of them. I know you haven't, I said. You never paid much attention to your mother's hobbies. Brittany's eyes darted between me and Terrence. What does his mother have to do with this? Everything, I said. G stands for Gabriel. S stands for Serena. The air left the room. Terrence looked like I had physically struck him. Brittany's manicured hand flew to her mouth. That's right, son, I said, leaning forward. G&S Holdings is the investment company your mother founded 20 years ago. The one she ran quietly from her sewing room while you thought she was just an old woman doing cross-stitch, while you... I looked at Brittany, thought she was just a simple, naive woman. She wasn't just my wife, Terrence. She was the smartest person I ever knew. When I was managing that warehouse, breaking my back for 40 years, she was taking her small savings and my paycheck and building something. She bought a duplex in '95, sold it, bought a small apartment building in 2003. She learned the market. She learned how to leverage, how to create corporations, how to protect her assets. I let the truth settle on them, a weight they couldn't possibly have imagined. She saw this coming, Brittany, I said, my voice dropping. She saw you coming from the day Terrence brought you home. She saw the hunger in your eyes. She saw how you looked at our things. And that's when she created the trust. And that's when she put all her assets, including G&S Holdings, under its protection. Protection from you. I looked at Terrence, who was shaking his head, trying to deny what he was hearing. The company that made the cash offer to buy this house was me. It was my money run by my lawyer through my company. I was the buyer all along. Terrence made a sound, a low, choking gasp. He stumbled backward and his legs just gave out. He collapsed onto the floor, sitting heavily against the wall where he used to measure his height as a boy. He put his head in his hands. You set us up," he whispered, his voice cracking. You knew everything. You let us. You watched us." "Yes," I said. "You let us sell you your own house." He finally shouted, the full humiliating absurdity of it crashing down on him. "You trapped us." I stood over him. The old senile man was gone. "No, son," I said, and my voice was as hard and cold as steel. "I didn't trap you. I gave you the rope. I gave you 660,000 feet of rope. And I watched. I watched you weave the noose, I watched you test the knot, and I watched you gleefully kick the stool out from under yourselves." I looked at the mess. He was this 45-year-old man, my son, crying on the floor of the house he tried to steal. "I just let you." Terrence was broken. He was just sobbing. I don't understand. But Brittany was different. She was made of something else, something harder, something ugly. I watched her as she processed the information. Terrence was a lost cause, a crying child. But her mind was already moving. I saw the calculation return to her eyes. The shock was fading, replaced by a new, desperate strategy. She stood up straight. She smoothed down her expensive-looking jeans, the ones Serena and I had probably paid for. "Fine," she spat. Her voice was shaking, but it was full of venom. "Fine, you win. The house is yours. This disgusting old falling-apart house is all yours. Congratulations, old man. You and your trust." She looked at me, her face twisted. "I don't care. We don't need this house." She grabbed Terrence by the arm, trying to haul him to his feet. "Get up, Terrence. Get up." She looked back at me, her eyes burning with a new fire. "This isn't over. You think you're so smart? You think she was so smart? This house might be in your trust. But Terrence is still her son. He's still your son. There's a will, Gabriel. You can't write him out of the will. We'll see what the rest of the estate says. We'll get our share. You can't stop us from getting the rest of the money." "Oh, you're right, Brittany," I said. My voice was steady. "You are absolutely right. There is a will." Serena was nothing if not thorough. Terrence, who was still slumped on the floor, looked up. His face was blotchy and tear-streaked, but now a new desperate hope flickered in his eyes. He was still her son. She couldn't have cut him out completely. Brittany saw that flicker of hope, too. "See," she spat, grabbing Terrence by the arm and trying to haul him to his feet. "Get up, you fool. This isn't over. Where is it Gabriel read the will? Read what she left her son." I reached back into the heavy manila envelope, the one they thought was finished. "You're right," I said, pulling out a crisp, folded legal document. She did leave something very specific for Terrence. A small, strangled sound of victory escaped Brittany's lips. She thought she'd won. I unfolded the paper. Mr. Henderson had walked me through this part. "It's a formal document," I said. "Last will and testament of Serena Johnson. Here it is. Article 4. Regarding my beloved son, Terrence Johnson." Brittany was vibrating. She was practically perched on her toes. Terrence looked like a drowning man waiting for a life raft. I cleared my throat and read, "To my son Terrence, I leave you two things." I paused. First, I read, "I leave you my unending, unconditional love. I have loved you every day of your life, even when you disappointed me. Even now." A strange, confused look crossed Terrence's face. He was waiting for the but. The but was the second item. I continued reading. "Second, I leave you the $50,000 debt you incurred from your father 10 years ago. A debt he paid from his own 401k. A debt you never repaid and he never mentioned." Terrence staggered back as if I had physically struck him. She knew. I told you, son, I said quietly. She knew everything. I kept reading Serena's final words to him from the will. I forgive this debt, Terrence. It is paid. But I leave it to you as a reminder of the cost of your choices and the depth of your father's quiet sacrifice. I hope one day you finally learn to stand on your own 2 feet. Silence. Utter devastating silence. Terrence just stared at the floor, the shame finally hitting him. He understood. He had been disinherited with love and a history lesson. But Brittany was not shamed. She was enraged. That's it, she shrieked, her voice cracking. Love and a forgiven debt. That's all. After everything, that evil, that spiteful old woman. She was pacing now, a caged animal, her mind racing. She left her son nothing. She left us nothing. Oh, I wouldn't say that. I said, my voice calm. Brittany froze mid-pace. What? She didn't leave her son nothing, I said. She left him a lesson, a very expensive one. But me, I reached back into the envelope. She left me something else entirely. My fingers closed around the last 2 items, the small ornate skeleton key, and a single folded sheet of paper with an address. I held up the key. It gleamed under the living room light. What is that? Brittany whispered, her eyes fixed on the key. Another one of her sentimental pieces of junk. No, I said. This is a key to the second house, the one you never knew about. Second house. Terrence looked up, his voice hoarse. Dad, what are you talking about? Your mother was a brilliant woman's son, I said. While you were building startups and Brittany was building her brand, your mother was building an empire. She needed a place to work, a place away from all this disappointment, a quiet place. I unfolded the paper. A penthouse in Midtown on Peachtree Street, the one she bought 20 years ago under the G&S Holdings name, the one she put in my name personally 5 years ago, free and clear. Brittany looked like she was going to faint. A penthouse? But that's not all, I said. I pulled the last item from the envelope. It was a simple folded bank statement. A penthouse is a lot of upkeep. She knew I was a simple man, so she left me this. I unfolded the statement and held it up so they could both see the final balance. $500,422.16 in a private account, in my name, an account I never touched. I let the paper fall to the coffee table. She called it my freedom fund, Terrence. Money to ensure I would never ever be dependent on you. The number just hung in the air. $500,000. Brittany walked forward slowly, her eyes glued to the paper. She saw the number. She saw the bank's logo. She saw my name. She looked up, her face a mask of total agonizing disbelief. I saw her mind working, recalculating 50 years of her own assumptions, her own sense of superiority. She looked at my simple clothes, my old armchair, the faded curtains. All this, she whispered, her voice trembling. All this time, you let us live here. You let us think you were poor. I didn't let you think anything, Brittany. My voice was cold, and the sudden change in my tone made her flinch. You wanted to think that. You arrived in this house, you saw my simple furniture and my old car, and you made a calculation. You didn't see a man. You saw an obstacle. You saw a payday. It fit your story perfectly. A poor, senile old man who needed to be managed so you could get your greedy hands on his only asset. I turned to my son. He was still slumped against the wall, his face buried in his hands, rocking slightly. You too, Terrence. You saw exactly what you wanted to see. It was easier for you to believe I was a weak, confused old man, wasn't it? It made you feel powerful. It made you feel less guilty about living off of me, off of your mother for 5 straight years. It made it so much easier to agree with her plan to have me put in a home. I shook my head, the pity I once felt for him curdling into something hard. You both saw a stereotype. You didn't see the man who was paying the bills. And you damn sure didn't see the woman who was protecting you. Terrence looked up at that, his eyes red and swollen. Protecting us. What are you talking about, Mom? Mom always... I cut him off, my voice rising. You've been living in this house for 5 years, Terrence. You've been eating my food. You've been using my electricity. You've been sleeping in my bed. Did you ever once stop and ask yourself how you were surviving? Did you really think your influencer wife... I shot a look at Brittany, who spends $300 on a single tube of lipstick, was contributing to the mortgage. Brittany flushed. I make money. My brand... Your brand is a joke, and it's broke, I said flatly. I've seen the bills, the ones Serena intercepted because they were being sent here, the ones she paid. I looked back at my son, who seemed to shrink under my gaze. You thought you were just scraping by. You thought you were unlucky. Let me tell you the truth of the last 5 years, son. Let me tell you what your mother, the spiteful old woman Brittany just cursed, actually did for you. I walked over to the old oak desk in the corner, Serena's desk, where she kept her household ledgers. I pulled one out. It was all there in her perfect, neat script. Do you remember 3 years ago, Terrence? I asked him. When Brittany accidentally maxed out 3 different credit cards in her maiden name, the ones you didn't even know about. A $10,000 debt that just vanished. You thought she'd returned all the designer bags. You believed her lie. Terrence looked at Brittany. It was a new look, a look of sick, dawning comprehension. Brittany. What is he? She didn't return a single thing. I said, my voice like gravel. Your mother paid it. She tracked down the accounts. She called the credit card companies and she settled the debt. Every last penny. She paid it out of her own private account, the GNS account. She did it to keep collectors from showing up at this door. She did it to keep your name from being dragged through the mud. I flipped a page in the ledger. And how about that car, son, the one Brittany just had to have? The little white convertible. The one you said you got a great lease deal on. The lease you fell 6 months behind on. Who do you think paid the $3,800 in back payments to keep the bank from repossessing it? It wasn't you. That was Mom, he whispered. His voice was a child's voice. That was your mother. While you were both in this house complaining that her kitchen was outdated and that she was always in the way, she was silently cleaning up your messes. She was protecting the son she loved from the consequences of the life you chose to live. I wasn't finished. I walked closer to him. This was the one that needed to land. And you, Terrence, your job. The job you've managed to keep for the last 4 years, you're not very good at it, son. I know that. Your boss knows that. You know who else knew your mother. He just looked at me confused. What are you talking about? That annual performance bonus you get every Christmas, I said. The $5,000 check that always saves the day. The one you always bragged about. Where did you think that came from? Did you really think you were top salesman of the year? I let the terrible truth fill the silence of the room. Your mother knew your boss. They went to college together. She met with him. Mr. Henderson and I were both there. She set up a private, confidential arrangement. Every December she wired $6,000 from G&S Holdings to his personal account. He kept $1,000 for the inconvenience and his silence, and he passed the other $5 on to you as a performance bonus. It was the only way she could get money into your hands to pay your bills without her. I pointed at Brittany, finding out about it and spending it on shoes and handbags. I pointed at Brittany, who looked like she was going to be physically sick. She did that, I said, my voice low and shaking with an anger I hadn't even realized was there. This spiteful old woman you were so quick to discard, she was the only reason you weren't fired. She was the only reason you aren't bankrupt. She was the only reason you're not on the street right now. She spent the last 5 years of her life while she was sick, while she was dying of cancer, managing your failure. Terrence was speechless. He couldn't form a word. He just stared at me, the architecture of his entire adult life crumbling to dust in a matter of minutes. Brittany was breathing heavily, her hand over her mouth. She saw it all slipping away. I looked at them, these 2 healthy, capable adults in their 40s who had lived like parasites. She protected you, I said. I enabled you. We were both wrong. But she's gone now, and so is my patience. I turned and walked out of the living room. I walked right past them and went up the main stairs. They didn't follow. They were too stunned. I walked into the master bedroom, my bedroom, the room they had taken. The smell of Brittany's expensive perfume still hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I went to the walk-in closet, and there they were, the two large black suitcases I had packed that morning while they were out at brunch, no doubt celebrating their impending windfall. What are you doing?" Terrence had finally followed me. He was standing in the doorway, his face pale and slack. "I told you," I said, grabbing the first heavy suitcase and dragging it across the hardwood floor. "I packed." I grabbed the second one, a tacky, fake designer bag that Brittany cherished. I dragged them both out into the hallway. "This," I said, "is what I was packing while you were out with your appraiser, your things." I gave the first bag a hard shove with my foot. It teetered on the edge of the stairs and then toppled end over end down the main staircase, landing with a heavy, sickening thud in the foyer. "Dad, no!" Terrence yelled, lunging forward as if to stop me. I shoved the second one. It tumbled after the first, crashing into the banister. I went back into their room, grabbed an armful of Brittany's designer clothes from the chair where she'd left them, and I threw them over the railing. They drifted down like colorful, expensive ghosts, landing in a pile on top of the suitcases. "You can't do this," Terrence shouted, finally finding some energy. He grabbed my arm. "You can't just throw us out. This is my house. I live here." He grabbed my arm. His fingers dug into my bicep hard. "You can't do this. This is my house. I live here." For a second, I saw the face of the spoiled child I had created, the child Serena had tried to protect. The anger in his eyes was real, but underneath it was the blind panic of an entitled boy who had just been told no for the very first time. I looked down at his hand on my arm. Then I looked back up at his face. "Get your hand off me, son," I said. My voice was so cold, so quiet, it scared him more than if I had shouted. He let go, stumbling back. "This is not your house," I said, walking past him down the stairs toward the foyer. "You were a guest here, a 5-year guest, and your stay is over." Brittany was standing at the bottom of the stairs next to the pile of her expensive, ugly clothes. She looked like a trapped animal. You can't," she stammered. "We have rights. We're residents. You can't just throw us out." "I'm not throwing you out, Brittany," I said as I reached the foyer. "I'm having you removed." "And who's going to make us?" she sneered, finding a last scrap of defiance. You old fool, you going to pick us up and throw us out yourself?" "No," I said. "I'm not." I reached for the handle of the front door. "But they will." I pulled the door open. Standing on my front porch, calm and professional, were 2 police officers from the Decatur PD. A younger officer, a woman, and an older, hardened-looking man. They weren't here by accident. Mr. Henderson wasn't just a lawyer. He was a strategist. He had anticipated this. He had called them 30 minutes ago, explaining that the legal owner of the property might need assistance removing trespassers who had been previously advised of their status. Brittany froze. All the color, all the rage drained from her face, leaving only a pasty, sick-looking white. Terrence, standing at the top of the stairs, just gaped. The older officer, his name tag read Miller, looked past me at the pile of suitcases and clothes in the foyer. He looked at Brittany, then at Terrence on the stairs. He turned back to me. "Mr. Gabriel Johnson," he asked, his voice polite but firm. "I am," I said. "Thank you for coming, officers. I seem to be having a situation." "So, we understand," Miller said. He stepped just inside the doorway. "We received a call from an attorney, Mr. Alan Henderson, regarding a civil matter. He advised us that you are the sole trustee and legal owner of this property." "That's correct," I said. "And these 2 individuals," I gestured to Terrence and Brittany, "are refusing to leave the premises." Officer Miller nodded. He turned his full attention to Brittany. "Ma'am, is this true? Have you been asked to leave by the homeowner?" Brittany found her voice, and she chose to lie. "No, this is a family misunderstanding. He's my husband's father. He's senile. He's confused. He doesn't know what he's saying." The officer's face didn't change. He was used to this. "Ma'am, we have already verified the legal ownership of 1240 Maple Drive with Mr. Henderson, who provided the trust documentation to our precinct. Mr. Gabriel Johnson is the sole legal authority here. If he asks you to leave, you must leave." "But," Brittany was desperate. "We live here. We've lived here for 5 years. You can't just kick us out. It's illegal." "Actually, ma'am," the younger officer spoke up, her voice sharp. "Under Georgia law, without a lease, you are considered tenants at will. Now that the legal owner has given you verbal notice to vacate, you must vacate immediately. If you refuse, it becomes criminal trespassing." "This is ridiculous," Brittany shrieked. "I'm not leaving Terrence. Tell them this is your house." But Terrence didn't say anything. He was just slowly walking down the stairs, one heavy step at a time, his eyes empty, defeated. He had lost. He knew it. The commotion Brittany's shrieking was drawing attention. I saw my neighbor, Mrs. Gable, peer out from behind her curtains. Across the street, Mr. Dyson, who was always washing his car on Sundays, stopped and watched. This was the public humiliation Serena had wanted to spare them, but they had chosen it. They had earned it. "Officer," I said, my voice clear and loud enough for the neighbors to hear, "it's worse than just trespassing. These two individuals just admitted to me and to my lawyer on speakerphone that they attempted to fraudulently sell this property. They signed a contract with a buyer pretending to be the owners." Officer Miller's eyes sharpened. He looked at Terrence. "Is that true, sir?" Terrence just stared at the floor. He tricked us," Brittany stammered, pointing a shaking finger at me. He set us up. It was a test. He's a senile, cruel old man." "Ma'am," Miller said, his patience gone, "I am not here to mediate your family drama. I am here to enforce the law. The owner of this property wants you gone. You will take your bags, which appear to be packed for you, and you will leave the premises now." He put his hand on his utility belt. He didn't threaten. He didn't have to. The authority was absolute. Brittany looked around, her eyes wild, searching for a weapon, an escape route, anything. She saw Mrs. Gable watching. She saw Mr. Dyson shaking his head in disgust. She saw the pile of her expensive junk lying in the foyer like garbage. She had lost. She had lost the house, she had lost the money, and now she was losing her dignity in front of the entire neighborhood. Terrence walked past her without a word. He bent down and picked up one of his suitcases. He didn't look at her. He didn't look at me. He just walked out the front door and dropped the bag on the lawn. Brittany let out a sound, a guttural, wounded animal sound of pure, undiluted rage. She grabbed the other suitcase and her fake designer bag and stormed out after him, knocking over a small lamp table by the door. It crashed to the floor. The officers followed them out, making sure they were off the property. I stood in the doorway of my house, my home. Terrence and Brittany were standing on the sidewalk, surrounded by their luggage. A tableau of greed and consequences. Neighbors were definitely watching now. Brittany was screaming at Terrence, blaming him, her voice shrill. He just stood there, taking it his back to me. Then slowly he turned around. He looked at me standing on the porch. The shame was gone. The defeat was gone. His eyes were no longer the eyes of my son. They were the eyes of a stranger. Cold, empty, and filled with a terrifying, bottomless hatred. He stared at me for a long, long time. Then he said, his voice quiet, but carrying clearly across the lawn, "You'll regret this." I met his gaze. "You'll die alone in that house," he whispered. "I swear to God, you will regret this." He said I would regret it. His voice was a low growl full of a venom I had never heard from him, but that I recognized instantly. It was the same tone Brittany used when she thought I couldn't hear her. The officers stood by their cars, ensuring the confrontation didn't escalate physically. Mrs. Gable was still watching from her window, her hand over her mouth. Mr. Dyson had stopped pretending to wash his car and was just staring, his hose running uselessly onto the pavement. Terrence and Brittany were a pathetic sight, standing on the sidewalk next to a pile of expensive luggage and designer clothes, homeless. Brittany was screaming into her phone, probably calling her parents or a lawyer or anyone who would listen to her version of the story. Terrence just stared at me. His eyes were cold. "You'll die alone," he repeated. I stood on my porch, the porch Serena and I had built with our own hands. I looked at my son, this 45-year-old man who looked like a stranger. "Terrence," I said, my voice carrying across the lawn. He flinched, but he didn't look away. "Your mother," I said, "was a merciful woman. She knew. She knew about the $50,000 you took from me 10 years ago. She knew, and she never said a word to you. She didn't even tell me until she wrote that letter. She could have. She could have exposed you. She could have sued you. She had the proof." I pointed to the document in my hand. "But she didn't. She put it in her will as a forgiven debt. She left you love, and she left you a reminder of your father's sacrifice. She gave you a chance, Terrence. Even from the grave, she was giving you one last chance to be a better man. He just looked at me, his face impassive, the hatred masking any shame he might have felt. The hope I'd had, the tiny foolish spark that maybe this would be the moment he finally woke up. It died. It died right there on the porch. Brittany snapped her phone shut and stalked over to him. "He's right, you know," she hissed at me. "She was a merciful woman, but he," she jabbed a finger at Terrence, "is her son. And you can't just throw him out with nothing. We'll sue. We'll contest the will. We'll contest the trust. We'll get our share. We'll get half of everything." I almost laughed. They still didn't get it. They were still fighting for scraps. Terrence finally found his voice again, but it was quiet, desperate. He looked past Brittany, his eyes locking on mine. "Dad, are you going to sue us for the fraud? For trying to sell the house?" He was terrified. Not of me, not of what he'd done. He was terrified of jail. I saw Brittany's head snap toward him, her eyes wide. She hadn't even considered that part, the criminal part. I looked at my son, 45 years. I'd spent 45 years being his father. I'd held him as a baby. I'd taught him how to ride a bike on this very sidewalk. I'd sat with him at this kitchen table trying to explain algebra. I'd bailed him out of his failures. I'd given him $50,000. I'd let him and his parasitic wife move into my home, take my bedroom, and eat my food for 5 years. I had enabled this. Serena had seen it. She had tried to protect me from my own love for him. Where had I failed? Or was this just who he was? Was this the rot that had been inside him all along? The weakness Serena saw, the weakness that Brittany had fed and fattened until it consumed the man. Maybe it didn't matter. He was a stranger now. A stranger with my last name standing on my lawn threatening me after trying to steal my home. "No, Terrence," I said. The relief on his face was instant. Brittany let out a sharp breath. "No," I said again. "I'm not going to sue you. I'm not going to press criminal charges for the fraud. I'm not going to have you put in jail." "Dad?" He started taking a step toward me, the old manipulation returning to his eyes. "I knew you'd. Because your mother wouldn't want that." I cut him off, my voice like ice. "She would have found a way to forgive you. She always did. And I will honor that. I will not be the man who sends his only son to prison." I let him absorb that. I let him feel that flicker of victory. "But," I said, and that one word stopped him cold. "I am going to do the one thing I should have done 5 years ago. The one thing I should have done 10 years ago when you came to me with your hand out and your eyes full of lies about a startup." He just stared, waiting. "I'm going to let you go, son." "What does that mean?" he asked, his voice small. "It means I'm done. I'm done cleaning up your messes. I'm done paying your debts. I'm done pretending your wife isn't a leech. I'm done giving you bonuses you didn't earn. I'm done being your safety net. You're 45 years old. You want to be a man. Go be one. You want to sell something. Go find something you actually own." I looked at the two of them standing there on the sidewalk, surrounded by their pathetic pile of designer junk. "You're on your own." I turned my back on them. I walked back into my house. I didn't look back when Brittany started screaming again. I didn't look back when I heard Terrence call my name, his voice no longer full of hatred, but of a new dawning absolute terror. I walked into the foyer past the toppled lamp and I closed the heavy oak door. I turned the deadbolt. The click echoed in the suddenly wonderfully silent house. The house was silent. For the first time in 5 years, I couldn't hear the muffled sound of Brittany's television shows through the wall. I couldn't hear Terrence's loud, complaining voice on the phone in the hallway. I couldn't feel the heavy, oppressive weight of their resentment, their impatience, their constant, silent wanting. The silence was vast. It filled the rooms. I stood there in the foyer for a long time, just breathing it in. I heard the police car start up and pull away from the curb. I heard Mrs. Gable's blinds snap shut. The show was over. I didn't sleep in the small guest room that night. I walked up the stairs, my hand on the banister Terrence had slid down as a boy. I went into the master bedroom. My bedroom. It smelled like Brittany's expensive chemical perfume. I walked to the windows, the ones Serena had always opened first thing in the morning, and I pushed them wide open, letting the cold November air flood the room, letting it chase out the last 5 years of their presence. I stripped the high thread count sheets that Brittany had bought no doubt with Serena's secret money and threw them in a pile in the hallway. I found an old clean set of Serena's linens in the back of the closet. They smelled like her, like lavender and quiet. I slept in my own bed for the first time since they had moved in. I woke up before the sun, a habit from 40 years on the warehouse floor. The house was still. I went to the kitchen Brittany hated. I made my coffee strong and black, just how I liked it. I sat at the small table, and the faded yellow cabinets, Serena's sunshine, greeted me like old friends. I drank the first cup, and the knot of anger in my chest began to loosen. I drank a second, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. I felt resolved. At 9 o'clock, I picked up my phone. I dialed Alan Henderson. He answered on the first ring. "Gabriel, are you all right?" The officers filed their report. They confirmed the trespassers were removed. "I'm fine, Alan," I said. My voice sounded clearer than it had in years. "Thank you. Everything is quiet." "Good," he said, his voice warm but all business. "What is the next step, my friend?" I looked around the room. I saw the scuff mark on the wall where Terrence always kicked off his shoes. I saw the small dark stain on the carpet where Brittany had spilled a glass of red wine 2 years ago and had just left it. "The next step," I said, "is to sell the house. This house. The one on Maple Drive." There was a respectful pause on the other end. "Gabriel, are you certain that's 50 years of your life?" "I'm certain, Alan," I said. "It's not my home anymore, it's just a house. And it's tainted. Sell it. Sell it as fast as you can. Put it on the market today. I don't care about the price. Just get it done." "Very well," Henderson said. "And the proceeds, as the trustee, you direct where they go." I had thought about this all night, lying in that big empty bed. I knew exactly what she would have wanted. "All of it, Alan. Every last penny. I want it donated. I want you to create a new fund. Call it the Serena Johnson Cancer Fund. I want you to give it to the hospital. The Winship Institute at Emory. The one where she was treated." And this time the silence was longer. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick. "Gabriel, that's the entire value of the house. That's over $700,000. "I know exactly how much it is," I said, "and I know exactly where it's not going. That's what I want." "I'll draw up the paperwork immediately," he said. "It's a noble gesture, Gabriel." "It's not a gesture," I replied. "It's a cleansing." I hung up the phone. A noble gesture. He didn't understand. It was justice. Serena had spent the last 2 years of her life in and out of that hospital wing. I knew every nurse on that floor. I knew the smell of the antiseptic, the squeak of the chemo cartwheels. I had sat in those awful, uncomfortable vinyl chairs for hundreds of hours, holding her hand while the poison dripped into her veins, praying it would work. I had been there for every single treatment, every single one. Where was Terrence? Where was Brittany? I remembered one day, a Tuesday, when Serena was having a bad round. She was weak, pale, and so scared. "Could you call Terrence?" she had whispered to me. I'd like to see my son." I had stepped into the hallway. I called him. He was at home in my house, less than 20 minutes away. "Oh, Dad, I can't today," he had said, his voice impatient. "Brittany has a huge brand launch. She needs me here to help with the photos. We're just swamped. Can you just tell Mom I love her? We'll try to swing by this weekend." A brand launch. For makeup. He never came that weekend. They went to a new brunch spot instead. Brittany posted pictures of it. Mimosas and avocado toast. In the 2 years Serena was sick, they visited her in the hospital exactly twice. Once at the very beginning when they brought wilting flowers and stayed for 10 minutes. The second time was at the very end when the doctors told us it was time. They came, they looked uncomfortable, and they left before she even passed. Too busy, they always said. Too busy living in the house she owned. Too busy eating the food she'd paid for. Too busy waiting for her to die so they could sell the kitchen she loved. So yes, let the house be sold. Let every penny Terrence and Brittany thought they were inheriting go to the place that had actually cared for Serena. Let it buy a new infusion chair. Let it pay for a nurse's salary. Let it fund the research that might save another woman's husband. Let this house in its death finally do the good my son never would. I stood up from the kitchen table. The house was empty now, truly empty. The purpose of the house was gone. I walked through the rooms one last time. 50 years. It was hard. It was harder than I expected. I saw the pencil marks on the doorframe in the hallway where I had marked Terrence's height. T, 1985, T, 1986. I saw the worn spot on the carpet where Serena's armchair used to be before I moved it to the guest room for her. I touched the frame of the front door. This was my life. How could I just sell it? My hand went into my pocket. I felt the hard, cold metal of the key Serena had given me, the skeleton key. "Don't open it until you need to," she had said. "When you see our son, forget who he is." He hadn't just forgotten. He had erased himself. And I realized Serena knew this would happen. She knew I couldn't stay here. The house wasn't just filled with good memories. It was tainted. It was stained by the last 5 years, by the whispers, by the greed, by the final ugly confrontation on the lawn. Serena would understand. In fact, she had already understood. She had planned for this. She had given me an escape. I didn't need to pack. I had nothing here I wanted to take. Not really. The clothes in the guest room were old. The furniture was just stuff. The real things, the memories of Serena, the real Serena, I carried those inside me. I went to the closet, grabbed the one small duffel bag I owned, and put in my toothbrush, my medication, and the sealed manila envelope from Serena, the one that still held the bank statement and the penthouse address. I took one last look around the living room. I saw the small lamp table Brittany had knocked over. It was still lying on the floor, its leg broken. I left it there. I walked out the front door and pulled it shut. I didn't lock it. It wasn't my problem anymore. I called a car service on my phone. When the black sedan pulled up, the driver got out to help me with my bag. "Just this one, sir?" he asked. "Just this one," I said. I got in. I felt the soft leather of the seat. It felt like the future. The driver got in. "Where to, sir?" I pulled the small slip of paper from the envelope. The address in Midtown. "It's time," I whispered to myself. "Time to see my second home." I stepped out of the sedan onto Peachtree Street. The air in Midtown felt different, sharper, cleaner. The building was all glass and steel soaring into the sky. The doorman, a young man in a crisp uniform, nodded at me. He didn't see an old man. He saw a resident. The elevator was silent and fast. It opened directly into the apartment. Penthouse C. The first thing that hit me was the light. My old house in Decatur was dark, full of small rooms and heavy curtains. This was the sky. The entire west wall was just glass from the floor to the ceiling 20 stories up. I could see the whole city spread out below me, the skyline of Atlanta, the parks, the traffic moving like blood cells through arteries. The apartment was modern, clean lines, dark wood floors, a kitchen with stainless steel appliances that looked like they had never been touched. It was completely furnished, but not with my furniture, not with the old worn armchair or the faded yellow cabinets. This was Serena's taste, the one she had hidden, elegant, expensive, and impersonal. It was the complete opposite of the life I had known. It was sterile, quiet, and beautiful. And it was all mine. It felt strange. It didn't feel like home. It felt like a fortress, which I realized was exactly what Serena had intended it to be. I walked through the main room. My footsteps echoed on the wood floor. I had only my small duffel bag, which I set down by the door. I ran my hand along the marble countertop in the kitchen. Smooth. Cold. There was only one personal item in the entire apartment. It was sitting on a sleek glass desk that overlooked the city. It was a single silver picture frame. I picked it up. My heart ached. It was us. Gabriel and Serena, 1975. We were at a company picnic, my first promotion. I was in a terrible plaid suit and I was trying to lift her onto my shoulders. She was laughing, her head thrown back, her hair a beautiful wild cloud. We were so young, so full of everything. I didn't even know this photo existed. She must have kept it hidden. Tucked into the corner of the frame was a small folded note. Her handwriting. I opened it. "For your new beginning, my love." That was all it said. "For your new beginning." I sank into the expensive leather chair behind the desk. I looked at the photo and then at the note. She knew. She knew this day was coming. She knew the house on Maple Drive was tainted, that I couldn't stay there. She knew I would have to start over alone. She hadn't just left me a key. She had left me a life raft. This entire apartment, the G&S Holdings Company, the trust, the bank account, it wasn't a secret she kept from me. It was a future she built for me. She had been planning my escape even as she was planning her own. While I was sitting by her hospital bed, consumed with grief, she was clear-eyed, practical, and 10 steps ahead of everyone, just like she always was. She had been protecting me right up until the very end. I found the coffee maker. It was one of those complicated European machines. I finally figured out how to make a simple cup. I took the mug and walked out onto the balcony. The wind was sharp up here, but the view was worth it. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and deep purple. I watched the city lights begin to glitter. I thought about Terrence. I thought about the hatred in his eyes as he stood on my lawn. "You'll die alone," he had said. I looked out at the sprawling city, at the millions of lights, at the life thrumming below. I didn't feel alone. For the first time in 5 years, I didn't feel the crushing weight of their expectations, their need, their disappointment. I didn't have to listen to their whispers. I didn't have to watch my son be manipulated by a woman who despised us. A tear rolled down my cheek. It wasn't for me. It was for him. For the son I had lost. Not the stranger on my lawn, but the little boy with flour on his face, the boy who used to hold my hand. He was gone. He had been gone for a long, long time. I was just the last one to realize it. I took a sip of coffee. It was strong. I felt sad. But underneath the sadness, for the first time since Serena got sick, I felt peace. I stayed out on that balcony until the sky was black and the city was a sea of jewels. I finished my coffee. I went back inside the sliding glass door, shutting out the sound of the wind. The apartment was silent. I put my mug in the sink. I looked at my duffel bag by the door. I should probably unpack. Just then, my phone vibrated in my pocket. It was the simple, cheap phone I'd had for years. It buzzed against the silence of the $1,000,000 apartment. I pulled it out. An unknown number. I didn't recognize it. It was probably Mr. Henderson or maybe the hospital about the donation. I answered. "This is Gabriel." There was a sound on the other end. A sharp, gasping breath, crying. "Gabriel!" a voice shrieked. A voice I knew all too well. "Gabriel, you have to help me. He's gone. Terrence is gone." It was Brittany. I stood there in the silence of the penthouse, just looking at the photo of Serena, laughing, young, free. The phone vibrated in my pocket, the buzzing sound harsh and violent in the quiet room. I almost didn't answer. I knew who it was. The caller ID just showed an unknown number, but I knew. I let it ring a second time, then a third. Finally, I picked it up and hit the speaker button. I didn't want that voice close to my ear. I just laid the phone on the cold glass desk. "This is Gabriel," I said. A sound came through the speaker, a choked, wet, gasping sound, a sob. "Gabriel." It was Brittany. But this was not the voice I knew. The sharp, demanding, arrogant voice that had told me to clear the space at my wife's funeral was gone. The cold, triumphant voice that had told me my room was ready at the old folks' home was gone. This was the voice of pure, undiluted panic. She wasn't calling me Beau anymore. "Gabriel, please," she sobbed, the words tumbling out. "You have to help me, please. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, Gabriel. I was blind. I didn't know." I just listened. I looked out the window at the city lights. "It was Terrence," she wailed. "It was all him. He told me the house was ours. He told me the trust was just a formality. He said you wanted to move, that you were just being stubborn. He manipulated me. He twisted everything. I was just trying to be a good wife. I was just trying to support my husband. I never would have agreed if I had known the truth. I swear, Gabriel, I was blind." She was good. She was very, very good. Even in her desperation, her first instinct was to lie. To throw my son under the bus so fast it would give you whiplash. This was the woman who had stood in my kitchen, her eyes gleaming, telling me how to sell my memories. This was the woman who had smirked at me from the porch as she told Chad the appraiser to sell it fast. I let her cry for a few more seconds, letting the silence from my end amplify her panic. She finally stopped, breathless. "Gabriel, please, say something." I leaned forward closer to the phone. "Brittany," I said. My voice was calm, and the sudden quiet on my end made her stop her fake sobbing instantly. "I just have one question for you." What is it?" she whispered. "Anything. Are you apologizing because you are truly, deeply sorry for what you did?" I asked. "Or are you apologizing because you got caught?" The silence that followed was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a trapped rat, the sound of a manipulator who had just run out of moves. She couldn't answer. She just made a small, choking sound. "I thought so," I said, my voice flat. "You're not sorry, Brittany. You're not sorry you planned to throw me out. You're not sorry you called me senile in front of a stranger. You're not sorry you tried to sell my home, my wife's home, from under me. You're just sorry that I wasn't the weak, stupid old man you thought I was. You're sorry Serena was smarter than you. You're sorry I had a lawyer. You're sorry you lost." "No," she finally shrieked. "No, that's not true. It was a mistake. It was just a paperwork error. We didn't know." "It stops being a paperwork error when you stand on my porch and lie to a police officer about my mental state," I said, my voice turning to ice. "It stops being a mistake when you've been planning it for weeks. Mr. Henderson explained the law to you, Brittany, you and Terrence. You signed a binding contract to sell an asset that does not belong to you. That is felony real estate fraud. That is a crime." Crime, she whispered the word as if she had never heard it before. Conspiracy to commit fraud. I continued ticking off the list. "And that's just the house. That doesn't even touch on the potential mail fraud, wire fraud, all the things Mr. Henderson is currently looking into regarding G&S Holdings." No. "What happens now?" she whimpered. "The police. They just left. They took our names." "Gabriel, what did you do?" "Me," I asked. "I didn't do anything. You did. You are an accomplice, Brittany, and you are facing serious legal charges." The sound that came through the phone this time was not a sob. It was a high, thin wail of pure animal terror. "Jail charges. Oh my God. No, I can't. I can't go to jail. Gabriel, please, you can't let this happen. I'll do anything. I'll testify." I almost smiled. It didn't even take her 30 seconds. "I'll tell them everything," she screamed, her voice cracking. "It was Terrence. It was all Terrence. He made me do it. He's been manipulating me for years. He's in debt, you know? He's in so much debt. He owes money to people. He's desperate. It was all his idea. I just went along. I was scared. The betrayal was so fast, so complete. This was the woman my son had ruined his life for. This was the partnership built on greed. And the second the money disappeared, the second the jail cell door opened, they were at each other's throats. "You should have thought about that, Brittany." I said, my voice flat and devoid of any emotion. "You should have thought about jail before you tried to make a 73-year-old widower homeless. You made your bed. Now you have to find someone else's to lie in because you're not lying in mine anymore." "Please," she begged. "Please, Gabriel, don't hang up. I'm alone. He left me." That stopped me. "What do you mean he left you? Where is Terrence? Where is my son?" I heard her take a ragged breath. I don't know. Don't you lie to me, Brittany. Not now. Where is he?" "I'm not lying," she wailed, and this time the desperation sounded real. "I swear, I'm not after you. After you closed the door. After the police left. I was yelling at him. I told him he was an idiot. I told him he was weak, that he had ruined everything." She paused, taking a shuddering breath. "And he just looked at me. He didn't say anything, Gabriel. He didn't yell back. He just looked at me. His eyes were empty, like he wasn't even there. And I just kept screaming at him. And then what?" I pushed. "And then he bent down to his suitcase, the one you packed. He opened it, he took out his wallet and his car keys, and he just started walking." "Walking where?" "I don't know." I screamed at him. I asked him where he was going. I told him he couldn't just leave me there on the sidewalk with all those bags, with all the neighbors staring. He just kept walking. He got in his car. He didn't even look back. He just drove away. "Gabriel, he's gone. He took his wallet and he left me. He left me on the sidewalk with all of our stuff. He's gone." She broke down completely, her voice dissolving into hysterical gulping sobs. He had abandoned her. The second the plan failed, the second the money was gone, he had abandoned her just like he had abandoned me. Just like he had abandoned his mother's memory. A month passed. The silence in the penthouse was a new kind of quiet. It wasn't the heavy, oppressive silence of my old house, thick with unspoken resentment. This was a clean, high-altitude silence. I had expected Brittany to show up to pound on the door to continue her screaming fit. But she didn't. Her terror, it turned out, was much stronger than her rage. I met Alan Henderson in his office downtown, the one that smelled of old books and floor wax. "It's in motion, Gabriel," he said, his voice grim. He pushed a stack of papers across his polished mahogany desk. "The suit for felony real estate fraud has been officially filed with the Fulton County District Attorney's Office. Your son is now officially a wanted man. There's a warrant out for his arrest." I just nodded. The words felt distant, like they were happening to someone else. "And Brittany?" I asked. I found I didn't really care, but I needed to know how all the pieces had fallen. Henderson's face soured as if he'd tasted something bad. Ms. Brittany," he sniffed, adjusting his glasses. "She was remarkably cooperative, as you predicted. The moment my paralegal presented her with the evidence, the recorded conversations with Chad, the appraiser, the conspiracy charges, her role as a knowing accomplice, she folded." He let out a small, disgusted sigh. "She sang like a canary, Gabriel. She threw Terrence under the bus so fast it was almost impressive. It was all his idea. He was desperate. He was in debt. He manipulated her. A truly virtuosic performance. So what happens to her?" "She's agreed to testify against Terrence should he ever be apprehended," Henderson said. "In exchange for her full and complete cooperation, the DA is offering her a plea deal. 5 years probation, 500 hours of community service, and full, though symbolic, restitution for her part in the fraud. She won't see the inside of a cell." "And Terrence?" I asked. The name felt strange in my mouth. "Vanished," Henderson said simply. "His car was found abandoned at a Greyhound bus station in Macon. He used his last few dollars in cash and disappeared. He's a fugitive, Gabriel, a 45-year-old man with no money, no home, and a warrant for his arrest." I thought about that. My son. A fugitive. I should have felt something. Anger, sadness, a deep, profound grief. I didn't. I just felt nothing. A deep, cold emptiness where a father's love used to be. He had made his choice. I went back to the penthouse. I stood at the floor-to-ceiling window looking out over the city. Life was moving on thousands of feet below me, all those people going to work, meeting for lunch, living their lives. I walked to the sleek glass desk where Serena's note and photo still sat. The bank statement was lying next to it. $500,422.16. Serena's Freedom Fund. I had looked at that number every day for a month. What was I supposed to do with it? Buy a new car? I didn't need one. Travel the world? I didn't want to. I just wanted my wife back. I wanted the son I used to know back, the little boy with flour on his face. But I couldn't have either of those things. I thought about Serena. I thought about those last 2 years at the Winship Institute, the constant quiet beeping of the infusion pumps, the smell of antiseptic that I could never get out of my clothes. I remembered the nurses, how gentle they were with her, how they'd cried with me when she finally let go. I remembered sitting in those awful rock-hard vinyl chairs for hundreds of hours, holding her hand, watching the poison drip into her veins, praying it would work. I had been there for every single treatment, and I remembered calling Terrence, calling him from the hospital hallway. "Son, your mother is having a bad round. She's asking for you. Can you just come?" "Oh, Dad, I can't today," he had said, his voice impatient. "Brittany has a huge brand launch. She needs me here to help with the photos. We're just swamped. Can you just tell Mom I love her? We'll try to swing by this weekend." He never came. They went to a new brunch spot instead. Brittany posted pictures of it. I picked up the phone. I dialed Alan Henderson. "Alan," I said, "it's me again. That money. The 500,000. "Yes, Gabriel," he said. "Have you decided what you want to do with it? We can move it into a high-yield investment, set up a new trust for—" "No," I interrupted. "I don't want to invest it. I want to give it away." There was a long silence on his end. "Gabriel." "All of it, Alan," I continued. "I want you to call the hospital, the Winship Institute at Emory. I want to donate every last penny. I want them to build a new wing or a new research lab or just buy new chairs for the families. Comfortable chairs, not those awful vinyl ones." I looked at Serena's laughing face in the photo. "I want them to call it the Serena Johnson Oncology Wing, or the Serena Johnson Patient Comfort Fund. Whatever they want. But her name, I want her name to be on it. I want her name to stand for healing, for comfort, not for this, not for what our son did. Henderson was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick. Gabriel, that is. Gabriel. Now, that is the most fitting tribute I can imagine. I will make the call this afternoon. It will be an honor. I hung up the phone. I looked back out the window. I didn't need that money. I was 73 years old. My warehouse pension was more than enough to live on. This beautiful empty apartment was paid for free and clear thanks to Serena. The money wasn't for me. I finally understood what she meant by freedom fund. It wasn't freedom to buy things, it was freedom to act, freedom to make choices, freedom to right wrongs. Serena hadn't left me that money to spend. She had left it for me to use. She had watched Terrence and Brittany's greed grow like a sickness. She had watched it eat away at our son, hollow him out. She knew what they were, and she knew that after she was gone, they would come for me. They would come for the house. This money. This was her final move, her final checkmate. It was her way of taking the very thing they were willing to kill for money and turning it into something good, something pure, something they could never touch. She used their greed to fund a cure. She used the poison as the antidote. She was always smarter than all of us. 6 months passed. The house on Maple Drive sold for $710,000 in a fast market. Alan handled everything. The donation was made. I attended a small private ceremony at the hospital. They unveiled a beautiful brass plaque, the Serena Johnson Patient Comfort Wing, in loving memory of a woman whose foresight and generosity will bring peace to families for years to come. I touched her name carved into the metal. It felt right. I settled into the penthouse. I learned how to use the complicated coffee machine. I bought a few plants. I read books. I walked in Piedmont Park. I was quiet. Then one Tuesday, a piece of mail arrived. It wasn't a bill from the condo association or a letter from Henderson. It was a flimsy, bent postcard. The picture was of a bright, sunny beach in Mexico. Cabo, maybe. It looked cheap. I turned it over. There was no return address, just a postmark from Cancun. And 3 words. 3 words scribbled in a handwriting I knew as well as my own. A handwriting I hadn't seen in half a year. It just said, "I'm sorry, Dad." I stood there in the afternoon sun, streaming through the giant windows, holding that flimsy piece of cardboard. Terrence. He was out there, alive, apologetic, or maybe just feeling sorry for himself. It didn't matter. I looked at the card for a long time. I thought about the little boy with flour on his face. I thought about the man with hatred in his eyes on my lawn. I thought about this ghost in Mexico. I didn't cry. I didn't feel anger. I just felt finished. I walked over to the sleek modern desk. I opened a drawer. I placed the postcard inside next to the framed photo of me and Serena back when we were young and laughing. I closed the drawer. I turned and looked out the window. The Atlanta skyline stretched out before me, bright and clear. I had lost a son, but in the process I had finally found myself. Serena knew. She had always known. I took a sip of my coffee, and for the first time in my entire life I felt completely, perfectly, and devastatingly free. Here is the lesson we can learn from my story. This story teaches us the terrible price of enabling. For years I thought I was protecting my son by shielding him from his failures, but I was only feeding his weakness and his wife's greed. They mistook my kindness for weakness and my simple life for poverty. They never stopped to ask who was really paying their bills. They learned too late that true strength, like my wife Serena's, often operates in silence. Never underestimate the quiet ones. They are the ones who see everything, and they are the ones who are always prepared. Have you ever been underestimated by your own family? Share your story with me in the comments below.